Let's talk about Charles Oliveira. Main event last night for UFC Rio. He defeats Mateusz Gamrot at 248 of round two via essentially like rear naked choke / face crank. Hard to say exactly if it was choking and doing the face crank. You can get both of them. You can get both a crank and a choke from them, or you can get just a crank. But in any case, essentially, figure four, bicep grip from the back. Let me just say a couple things. First of all, the crowd itself, and we'll talk more about this on MK. We'll do like a full card recap on MK. The crowd itself was not necessarily, the Brazilian crowds are always very nationalistic. They cheer for the Brazilians and basically nobody else. You can tell them nice things if you beat a Brazilian and you get a post-fight interview. You can be like, "Oh, Rio, I love you so much." And you might get a smattering of applause on occasion, but in general, they're nationalists and they cheer for their own, which whatever, that's the way that it goes. They were not super alive during the course of that card, but whatever else they were, by the time Charles got out there, they were electric. Guilherme Cruz even saying that after you get the sub for Charles, he hadn't heard a Brazilian crowd roar like that since Big Nog had knocked out Brendan Schaub, right? We're talking a very, very long time. They came to life. The walkout was amazing. The intro was amazing. The crowd during the fight was amazing. And then Charles jumping into the crowd afterwards to be received with like a hero's welcome. Dude, that's one of the most, I'm not in any way exaggerating here, certainly for a fight night, but that in UFC history, that's to me one of the more memorable post-fight celebrations I've ever seen. I mean, your mileage may vary, but that's kind of how I feel. Like it was reminiscent of Jose Aldo in Rio jumping into the crowd after he fought Chad Mendes the first time. It felt a lot like that, only this one went on longer and seemed, I don't know. To me, it was reminiscent of that. And that itself is also one of the all-time more memorable / greatest post-fight celebrations in UFC history. And that's what you got here. Dude, is it me or has this been like a bit of a feel-good run for MMA? Yuri Prochazka gets to his winning ways after a very tough couple of rounds against Khalil Roundtree. And of course, I know he was coming off the Jamal Hill fight, but it had been a little while. He was facing adversity. He gets a win. Poatan, who is, if nothing else, a gigantic fan favorite, he gets a huge statement win. Both of those, of course, coming at UFC 320. Then here comes Charles off of a devastating knockout loss, to the point by Charles's own admission he considered hanging it up in the sport. He doesn't. He was supposed to fight Rafael Fiziev on this card. Fiziev falls out. Gamrot subs in. And he gets this win. And as I indicated, this incredible post-fight celebration. Dude, it's been a real nice feel-good run here for MMA. Several wins in a row where you're like, wow, like this is why I'm a fan. This is what I love. Dude, Charles Oliveira is so unique in the history of the sport. Obviously, with this win, he has the most, he already had it, but the most submission finishes, but now, he sets a new record with it. He has the most finishes, most subs all time. I think he's 3 away from having most UFC wins. I think he's pretty close to that. But he's certainly, when it comes to finishes and subs, he's the leader there, which just makes him remarkable automatically. But isn't it quite remarkable how he had a short notice opponent and he had no beef with Gamrot? There was a little bit of trash talk, but by the time the fight came, it was competitive, but they touched gloves, they embraced. It was not a thing. And it doesn't matter. I'm not saying I would hate to see Charles with some kind of adversary who he really hated and they got ugly. Well, that's part of the fight game too, right? That's also a real thing. But I'm just saying, doesn't it speak to what Charles does for us as fans that you don't really need any of that, and yet he can still lift your heart? Isn't that just remarkable? This late into his career with his back up against the wall like this, it's just insane. It's insane, dude. There's so many special guys. Well, that's actually not true. Special guys are rare, but I'm saying there's such... The ones who are special tend to be special in like these very unique ways. I guess is the point I'm trying to make. And of course, there's been other opponents and other fighters we've all loved that also did not necessarily have to have trash talk with their opponent. But it just seems like, I don't know, To me, Charles Oliveira embodies MMA joy. It's just joyful when he competes. And, obviously Topuria was better than him when they fought, but there's a certain joyfulness that we all get, a glee when Charles Oliveira competes because he is so action-oriented, because he is so offense first, because he is so good as well. Again, came up short against Topuria, but still, if this fight proves anything, it's that this guy is still quite viable. But it's just, to me, so remarkable that, we talk about, and I had mentioned even in this video, that the Brazilian fans are often quite nationalist, but I would argue that their embrace of Charles in the, obviously the walkout, but obviously in the post-fight celebration, honestly, they felt like all of us. That's kind of how I felt. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they'll do that, or they'll do something at least approximating that for a lot of the Brazilian fighters. I think that obviously that's a special level even for them. And it felt like what all of us were doing at home. It felt like, dude, it just sets the universe right when Charles wins. At least that's the way that it feels. Now, maybe people who aren't Charles fans think that this is some like crazy hyperbole. Perhaps that it is. I don't really know. But I don't know. I'm just trying to read the tea leaves, tell you how I feel, just looking around, seeing how everyone else feels. It just felt good to see Charles win, especially considering he had a not just coming off of a brutal knockout, but that it was, very, very quickly that there's turnaround. Frankly, an inadvisable level of turnaround. Obviously, he lost to Topuria at UFC 317. That was in late June. Here we are in early October. So you had all of July, all of August, all of September. So 3 months and some change. Not much. That's inadvisable, especially against a guy like Fiziev. And I was terribly worried. Now, Gamrot, not the same kind of threat, but I didn't know we were going to get. Now, let's talk about that fight. Time permitting, tomorrow I'll do a breakdown on this channel on some of the things that I saw. But to me, the real, it was Charles's guard. So first of all, Charles comes right at him, which was a problem against Topuria, but it wasn't a problem against Gamrot. In fact, it was the exact right thing to do against Gamrot. Gamrot never really got out of first gear in this fight. I mean, he got backed up. Again, it's kind of funny. Main event for UFC 320, a Brazilian comes right at his opponent. Main event for UFC Rio, the event right after it, Brazilian comes right at his opponent. Now, again, that was a little bit aberrant for Poatan in the intensity. This is more kind of typical what you might get with Oliveira. Nevertheless, was he shell-shocked from the Topuria fight? I didn't see any evidence of it. Anyway, comes across, gets right in his face, double jab, right-handing, really putting Gamrot on the back foot, trying to make sure he doesn't wrestle. Gamrot eventually gets, I have to go back and look, I believe a head inside single, and runs the pipe, dumps him. Oliveira gets to an overhook, and eventually, from guard, sits there and locks up, it was an omoplata. He couldn't finish an omoplata. What's interesting with the omoplata is you'll notice, you got a couple of choices if you're Gamrot and you're stuck in that omoplata. One is, because omoplata, if someone's doing it to me, they're going to be right here kind of side by side. We'll both be facing the same way. You can turn back into them, but you'll notice Gamrot really didn't try to do that because to the extent that he did, here comes Oliveira's long legs looking for a triangle. So you can't turn and face him because you'll get triangled. You can step over, and the first time he tried it, Oliveira had that hit an overhook essentially on the leg, so Gamrot couldn't do that. He had to put his weight down and then kind of shimmy as he was able to create separation and turn out, which he tried to do. Eventually, he goes back into guard, and then the same thing kind of happened. You see another omoplata. This time, what was different is that Gamrot didn't have that leg trapped, so he tries to jump over. And dude, just watch Oliveira during the second omoplata sequence when Gamrot is trying to jump over, right? Because again, you can't turn and face him, you'll get triangled. But maybe I can go the other way and I can jump around him. That will get me square to him and I can pull the arm out, and then that way I'll be fine. But if you jump over, what ends up happening is Oliveira, you can roll with really good black belts, even ones with good lanky guards like Oliveira, and you'll never get what Oliveira has because his timing is not super thought out. It's absolutely instinctual. As Gamrot is trying to jump over, you'll notice Oliveira reads it a million miles away and begins to sit up, which ends up splitting the base of Gamrot. He has 1 foot over, 1 foot under. And as a consequence, he has to sit out for a little bit, but eventually what ends up happening is that allows Oliveira to get up on top. Right, so he reads it right away, gets to an elbow, sits up, splits the base, and now Gamrot has his whole left arm and shoulder covered, and he has nothing to post there. He's got his right hand posted out, but he doesn't want to get turned, so he goes the other way and tries to knee bar. Oliveira reads it a mile away and then collects the ankle and gets on top, and then from there was able to take the back. Threatened with a choke in the body triangle the first round, couldn't get it. Second round comes right back out. Did you see what he did in the second round? He goes for a body lock on Gamrot. Gamrot has a knee shield standing. Oliveira picks him up and drops him, returns him to the mat. The knee shield is still in place. So what does Oliveira do? He runs clockwise so that the leg that's pressing into him from Gamrot falls away. He runs him this way and then back forward so that he's able to essentially get the hook released, drive him over his own weight, and he takes the back from there. And then from there, man, he's just off to the races and was cooking. And then eventually gets, I think he get the body triangle again. And then once more, he was able to put the choke over the back. There was some hand fighting involved. He was able to reestablish it. And again, I don't know if it was choking or not. It was certainly face cranking. It was probably both face cranking and choking. And so he gets the tap. Dude, he is so freaking good. Does this mean he's ready to go rematch Ilia Topuria? No. I think on some level, styles make fights. This is one such example. And again, Gamrot is not necessarily even with a style difference from Topuria, not on Topuria's level. Okay, it doesn't tell you that. But he did call out Max Holloway, which again will be a rematch if they did fight for the BMF title. I don't know who would be against this. Now, I don't know what the UFC has planned for any of their upcoming cards, White House or otherwise. I know they want to make a big push in January when the new Paramount deal gets going. There's a lot of different factors involved. I don't know how that's going to go. We'll talk more about this on MK, but certainly you can count me in as a fan of Oliveira versus Topuria. Excuse me, not Topuria. Oliveira versus Holloway too. Or I guess this would be Holloway Oliveira too, since he would be the BMF champ. One final note on this, if I may, which is to watch this guy received by the Brazilian crowd, his home people, was just, it was just joyful. It's just joyful. I don't know what's going to happen with the UFC's business model now that they're going to be moving away from pay-per-view. I don't know what that means, because part of the reason why pay-per-views have taken place in North America predominantly, not exclusively, we know they take place in Australia, Abu Dhabi, even in Brazil on occasion, but not typically. Typically, they're in North America, or at a bare minimum, they're just all kind of catered to North American timing. And the reason for that is obvious, is that that's the vast majority of the pay-per-view buying audience. But if that goes away, does that free you up to move title fights to other places because you don't have to meet pay-per-view demands? In other words, it just seems to me like a travesty that this guy never fought as a champion in Brazil. It was good that he got on this card and was able to be received this way for a fight night, and I don't think it's anything to sneeze at, but it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same as a guy going and competing with a belt around his waist for a major title in Brazil. Again, will this lack of pay-per-view having to cater to North American audiences allow title fights to become a more global phenomenon? I don't know how they have that planned in their business model. We will simply have to wait and see. But I guess I would conclude by saying, if there is a world that we can construct where Charles Oliveira or guys like him, fan favorites like him, guys who are heroes to their nations like him, if we're able to take title fights to those places to really reward them, I think that that's something that the UFC should look at. And by the way, as a sort of a small gesture, they gave Jose Aldo a walkout last night to kind of like make his retirement official in front of his people, the King of Rio, as a matter of fact, right? And it was a really nice gesture, I thought, by UFC. Again, it would have been better if he, by the way, as a champion, did get to fight in Brazil. And I think that makes a difference. So again, it's not like it doesn't ever happen. I'm not saying there's never been UFC pay-per-views in Brazil, but they tend to be few and far between. We want to make sure that the sport's best, the ones that we care about the most, and the ones that are also doing the most interesting work, and for a time, even now to a degree, but certainly for a time, that was Charles Oliveira, to the extent that they can be rewarded by fighting in front of their hometown people. I just think it makes it all so much more special. It's not the only thing that matters. Lots of things matter, but that's a pretty big one. And I think you got a glimpse into what it could have been. Certainly it was great, but you got a glimpse into what it could have been, and maybe a slightly more advantageous scenario for him. Nevertheless, Charles Oliveira gets back to his winning ways. The king of the guard in MMA, the king of the submissions and the king of the finishes, gets back on the winning track, submitting Mateusz Gamrot in the second round. We'll have more to talk about this on MK tomorrow. Until then, stay tuned.